say low marks in the ice, like where somebody's left their knee down on the ice, and it also lays on to the ice and it lays on the dirt. If people got left some stuff after the last game, it could be hair, it could be anything, it'll freeze onto that, and then I take that orange machine down there, it's called the scraper, and it's like a 5-foot blade, and I'll go around and I scrape all the top of the ice down, and it sort of helps form the ice. So you got to imagine it's not like hockey ice where it's got to have some sort of contour to it, so that when you throw rocks it starts to bend towards the middle ideally. And yeah, so then I go up and down and I scrape all the top layers off, and that's done twice a day. And then we take a mop and we clean up all the little bit of snow and stuff that's left behind. And then we come back and we have 2 applications of a backpack with a sprinkler on it, and I go along, and it's called pebbling, and I go and I put little dots of water on the top surface, and that freezes. And then I do another application of a different size dot that goes up down, and the idea of that is to give the rock sort of a surface to ride on. If it was just straight ice, it would be flat and have a lot of resistance, and it would be slow and hard to push the rock down the ice. So it actually rides on the top of this little pebble, and the running band on the bottom of the rock, which is just a thin little layer, it rides on top, and then it starts, depending on how you spin the rock, it starts to sort of get some grip, and it'll turn a certain way as it slows down or as you shoot it. So these are 2 different pebbling cans. This is the first application. There's little tiny holes. This one is extra fine. It's a smaller hole in it, so it leaves a small, very fine pebble. And this one's a little bit bigger, and it goes on second. It has slightly bigger holes, and it needs a bigger pebble drop, and it sits a little higher. So this one gets the initial sort of riding of the ice, and then this pebble can is smaller, so it sits a little lower, and as the game wears on, that starts to come into play. I run 2 different temperatures. So cold water will freeze faster and it sits higher. The hotter the water, when it lands on the ice, it sort of lays flatter. Hotter water is also less oxygen in it, so it will last longer. Cold water has more oxygen and the pebble will break down faster, and that's important as the game wears on. So on this one I run straight hot water. It'll run about 125 degrees. I leave a little bit of cold water in the bottom of this one, and when I add hot water to a certain level, I'm running around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So they act a little different. You can imagine when you're sprinkling, it lands, and not every one is sort of even. If you were to put it like a microscope to it, there's some that are a little bit higher, some a little bit lower, and you just take a little blade and you sort of shave off the top, and it gives it a nice level top to everything. So, and then yeah, and then I do what's called a nip, which is another little blade that I go along, and it just takes the top of the pebble off. So this is the nipper. It has 3 blades. They're like razor blades, very sharp, very thin, and they just ride on the top of the surface, and they nip off the top of the pebble, making it nice and flat, evenly flat, so that the rock has less resistance and maintains a good speed. and then put the hacks in and game's ready to play. Well, it is water. The clubs that can, I guess, afford, they have, it's called a DI system, and it goes through a charcoal filtering system and takes all the impurities out of the water. A good example of seeing impurities in ice, if you were to take an ice cube tray, put it in your freezer, you'll notice the outsides of the ice cubes as they freeze are nice and clear, and the insides of the ice cube are cloudy, and that is the impurities. So as the ice cube's freezing, it's pushing all the impurities in and then up to the surface. So if you didn't have pure water, clean water, you would have, as it freezes, the impurities moving to the top of the ice, and then that makes resistance and not great ice for curling. Well, we start in October, the 1st of October. It takes us about 12 days, almost 2 weeks, depending on the temperatures of the outside, to get the building cold and stuff. If the proper conditions, then we can get it done in about 12 days. You start, again, just putting little bits of water, and then once you start to get a little bit of water, then you can start to put more water on top. And then as you get that to a certain level, it's not very thick ice, actually. Surprisingly, it's only less than an inch thick at most times of the season. And then once you get to a certain layer, then we apply the white paint, and the entire place is sprayed with a whitewash sort of solution. And then once we got that down again, we would put light mists of water on it until we get a protective barrier. And then once you got a protective barrier on that white paint, you can start to put a little more water on it. And then when you get to that level, we would take all the circles, the houses are called, and we have a router that goes around, and we cut out the circles, the lines, and then we actually hand paint all the houses. And then once you got that done, the lines that you see out there, the red and the blue and the black lines, they're all actually yarn. It's just yarn that's pulled nice and tight, sprinkled with a little bit of water on top. And then once you start freezing that, again, we have to put protective layers on it, because you can imagine when you put sort of above freezing temperature water on top, as it lays there for the first little while, it's actually melting the top layer, so it has to be protected. And then once we get it protected well enough, then we can start putting more water down. And then once we get it protected, we start laying down, like, say, maybe 400 or 500 gallons at a time. And then once we build it up to the level, you have to get it completely flat, and nothing's level out there completely, but water eventually will get level. So once we usually get about 4,500 gallons of water in total out there, then we're usually level, flat. And that's our starting point for then getting it to league sort of play ready. It's just like a milk paint, or it's like just a it's not like an oil paint or anything like that. It's just sort of a milk paint that you use for all the arenas and things. It's the same paint that they use at hockey arenas as they do here. So these are the houses, and so this is the blue line out here. This is called the 12-foot. The white circle in here is called the 8-foot. This is called the 4-foot, and this is called the butt. This is the center line. T weight, you hear a lot of it. This is the back line. And then back in here is where the hacks go, which are out right now because we're going to maintain the ice here. This is the hog line. The rock doesn't pass this line, then it's not in play. And when you throw a rock, you must release the rock. When you slide out, you must release the rock before you hit the hog line. Yeah, it's a good question. So once it's play ready, we're able to play like a couple of matches each time with the ice the way it is, and then we would re-scrape it and re-pebble it. But that only lasts for about 7 or 8 weeks, and then the ice needs to be refreshed again because it's getting it gets dirty. You imagine you have 64 people in here a couple times a day, 6 days a week or whatever. There's stuff that falls off your clothes, hair, and particles from your curling shoes and things. So then we have to do what is called, there's two techniques that we do. One is called a melt. So I would turn all the heat up out there, the fans on, and what we do is we melt the top of the surface. And then once it's got water completely across the top of the surface, we turn everything back on and freeze it back down. And again, going back to the impurities, what that does, all the stuff that was the dirt and things actually floats when the water's there, and then it freezes and forces everything up. And then I go along and scrape all the dirt off, and it actually is black, like the snow is brown black. And so then I clean that all off there and stuff, but it's not too bad right now. But as I said, when we do a flood or a melt rather, that is almost brown black when it's when we're refreshing the ice. And then we apply more pebble and stuff and scrape and that's done twice a year. Well, you often will hear players, if you're watching it on TV or if you're watching or playing, you'll hear all of a sudden, "Oh, that picked," and that's usually the stone will be going along and it'll be coming in with a rotation. Everything looks normal, and then all of a sudden it just goes boom and it goes sideways. It could be a piece of rubber off a shoe, or like say just a piece of paint that maybe came off the sideboards or something. And then all of a sudden the rock goes funny and it sometimes comes to a screeching halt, sometimes it goes sideways. Well, as the game goes on, you'll hear the term, that path is getting worn down or it's getting very fast. So when you're, say, throwing at certain targets over and over, or certain spots over and over, the pebble starts to wear down. And sometimes later in the game, you'll hear the term, the ice is going flat. That's just meaning the pebble's wearing down. And as I said, when it gets there, it's got a lot more resistance. And then all of a sudden, it can start turning really hard or acting goofy or getting really slow. Well, they do, again, there's, as I mentioned, there's a running band on the bottom. It's just a thin little lip that goes along the bottom. And over time, that starts to wear. And when it gets a little fatter, there's more resistance, so the rocks are slower. So you hear people saying your ice is getting slow, or it's slow. So sometimes the rocks need to be retextured. Something we've been doing this year that a lot of clubs now do is it's called scuffing the rocks, and you actually put them in a little box with a special type of sandpaper, like a diamond coated type sandpaper, and you put little scuffs on the rock, and then that gives it a little bit of bite on the ice, so it'll curl more. So this is a curling stone.
They're a special type of rock that comes from Scotland, from a little island that actually produces all the curling stones basically in the world. So here's you have your handle. This little spot here is called the hitting band. That's where the rocks hit each other. This is out slightly, so they only hit right into here. In the bottom of the rock, I don't know if you can see, this is the little spot along here. It's about 5 to 6 millimeters wide, and it's called the running band. And that's what the rock only contact on the ice surface is right there. And this is your turns. When you release a rock, it's an out turn, an in turn. Well, the humidity affects your play because I think refers to a dew point. When you've got different temperatures outside and inside, it creates humidity in here, and when it hits the dew point, the vapor or anything that's in the air, humidity that's in the air, will actually settle down and lay on the ice, which you see as frost. And if you get frost on the ice, it becomes slow and heavier to play. We have a dehumidifier that's up in the back corner, and it tries to keep our humidity levels around 50%. You don't want any air movement at around 6 feet. That just creates more problems with humidity and affects your pebble. It could melt your pebble faster if it's got too much air blowing on your ice surface. Only at the end of the season, which is coming in a couple of weeks, and it's just we melt it slightly, and then we have a little front end sort of loader that comes in and just chops the ice, and we scoop it up and put it into bins and haul it away.
Okay.
At the end of the season only.
Okay.
A lot of people have trouble getting back up right away, so they stay down with their hand or their knee down. It only takes maybe more than 4 or 5 seconds, then you're starting to melt. Your body heat is melting the pebble. So if you were to have your hand here and melt some of the pebble, as a rock, the shot's coming down, it'll hit that funny spot that you just melted, and it affects how the rock reacts or finishes. That's the compressor that turns and runs, and turns the condensers into, takes the ammonia, which is like a refrigeration, just like a freezer or anything. It pumps all the ammonia through pipes and stuff out underneath the ice surface on the slab, and we have certain temperatures that we try to maintain. And this is the mechanical room. These are the hacks. So we have 2 of them. One is for right-handed throwers, and the other one's for left-handed throwers. 90% of the people throw with the right hand. So, here.